Hello, hello. Happy Tuesday, maybe Wednesday from folks tuning in. My name is Tyler. Really excited to get started here. We're going to give a few more minutes and do a quick sound check. Is everything sounding all right on your guys' end? Give me a thumbs up if so. Yeah, really excited for today's session. Really, going to be going into notebooks, which is, uh, we did a previous webinar on this maybe a few weeks back. We alternate between this one and our onboarding webinar. Hello, hello. Nice. That's good to hear. Everything's all right. Everything's all right. Yeah, we alternate between this onboarding webinar and the notebooks webinar. So this one will be a more in-depth session on how to get started using notebooks, one of the really great features here at Julius. Um, and yeah, we'll just do a use case based off of some sample data that I have. And hopefully it's enough to either get you guys started using notebooks, or if you're already using notebooks, maybe teach you a few things that you haven't unlocked yet on notebooks. Before we get started, really exciting news coming out from Julius. We have data connectors that we just launched, right? This is something that we've been heads down working on, our team here. So we'll have a special webinar actually coming up on Thursday where we'll work through setting up a data connector, what is a data connector, and how does it actually look in Julius. Really exciting stuff. I can't wait to show you guys. And it's actually going to work off pretty well with the notebooks that we're going to be working on today too. So stay tuned for that. Also had a great time last night meeting some folks here in the beautiful San Francisco Bay Area. We had a chance to meet some of our community here and some of our users, So do stay tuned and follow us on socials to hear the latest and greatest that's happening on Julius. And as always, subscribe to our Luma. We'll do these webinars as they, keep on increasing in demand. We hear from users some topics that they want us to cover. We hear that it is helpful to cover some other things too. So always open to feedback if you guys are looking for material or just ways that you could better either use Julius or learn more about just LLMs in general. That's what we're here for and why we sort of were inspired to do these sessions. That being said, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch over to my demo screen, right? I'm going to assume folks have seen our onboarding series so far. If you guys haven't, feel free to check out our Julius chat or Julius channel on YouTube. You'll see all of our previous webinars and recordings there. Alternatively, on Tuesday, we'll also do another onboarding webinar where we talk through a lot of the basics. So things like how to choose the different models, updating your chart themes, and even doing things like updating the actual files that you're using within Julius. So do check that one out. This session is going to be more of a Julius 102 where I'm going to go through our notebooks feature. You'll see some notebooks right away when you log into Julius, whether you're on a free account or on a subscribed account. You'll see some ready-made notebooks here. These are a really great way for you to get started. These are some notebooks that have been made by either the team here at Julius or even folks in the community too. That's one of the really cool things about notebooks is once you create something, run it for the first time and have a good draft, you can always share it and publish it too. You can think of these sort of like pre-made templates for you to use. This is an overview of a sales CRM close loss reasons. Very common for you to have like a CRM tracker, whether it's something in actual CRM program that you use, or if it's just a Google Sheet or an Excel sheet. So you could add in the data here. And what this notebook does is it's going to look at the reasons why things were closed, whether it was closed won or closed lost, and it's going to visualize it, right? This is what a notebook is. You're just running a series of cells, what we call cells, and different prompts, right? All pre-made, all preloaded. And the cool thing is you could save it and run it multiple times. So this is one example of a complete notebook. And in today's session, we'll walk through step-by-step on how to do this, some of the benefits of using notebooks, and just to show you a little bit around. But before I wanted to jump in, wanted to show you what a completed notebook looks like. You can find more of these notebooks here in the left side panel, Explore Notebooks, a whole bunch of different templates and completed notebooks that have been created, again, by folks here at Julius and also around the world. With that being said, we'll go over to New up in the upper left-hand corner and click on Notebook. This is the easiest way to just get started, and you'll see two cells by default, right? And again, cells you could think of like the building blocks of a notebook. There are multiple different types of cells, and you can view them here in the upper right-hand corner of the cell. Prompt cells, we'll walk through those. Those are ones where you simply run a prompt, similar to as if you're typing into a chat with Julius, and Julius will execute and run the code in your sandbox. Source, this is one here. That's how you add in files. We'll talk about that. And then some nuanced cells that we'll walk through together. But these are the 5 main types of cells that you could add, 5 main building blocks for a notebook. Before I hop into there, on the upper part, if you click on notebooks, these are all of the different notebooks that you've either created or have run. A little sneak preview here, you'll see scheduled. We're actually working on a way to schedule some notebooks. Something to talk about later. You'll see ones that were shared with you, and you'll see notebooks that you've run already in the past, right? The thing about notebooks, again, before we hop in, is you could have one main notebook, right? You could think of it sort of like a template. Once you're done with that template and you're good to run it again, you could simply create a new run, and it creates almost like a fork or a copy of that notebook. So at any point, you could always run a new copy of your notebook. You could create a new fork of it, start editing it, so that you sort of think of it more as building blocks, and once you have a finalized notebook, you could run it multiple different ways and edit it in multiple different ways, sort of like versions, if you will. The other cool things about notebooks, you could, again, have multiple different runs. So you see here, I have several notebooks that I've created in the past and multiple different runs within those notebooks. So each one of those runs is saved over time. So if you ever have, different data that you're using or more up-to-date data, or maybe you're using it to look at your last quarter's finances or something, each one of those, it'll save, and then you can access those there. Might take a little bit of time if it's really old data. Let's go back into the notebook that I created. On the left side, there's some panels here and buttons that you could use. One is collapsing all cell outputs, which we'll walk through. You can always add a new cell. And if you're familiar with things like Jupyter notebooks, you could actually import your own .ipynb files to Julius to just kickstart your progress. If not, no worries, we'll just get started from scratch there too. And then finally, the last thing I'll talk about is if you just click on the top bar here, it'll bring in the notebook details. And this is where you could update things like the name, description, and even custom instructions. What we talked about in our onboarding webinar last week, custom instructions allow you to bring sort of like a context backpack with Julius wherever it goes. Here we have custom instructions just for this specific notebook, right? If you're defining ARR in a specific way, or you want Julius to format dates or numbers or certain values a specific way, you could do that all inside the specific notebook itself without it carrying over to other notebooks, if you will. And then finally, some other things here. Tags is if you want to tag it for it to be visible in the Explore Notebooks page, and then also a cover image too. So that's the basics of just the overview of, just our way around notebooks. And the last one you'll see here is a run all button. And this is when we're done with our notebook. If you want to run all of the cells in sequence, you could do that too. Without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. So I'm going to click Add Data Sources, and I'm going to click Upload Data. Multiple ways that you could add data here. And again, on Thursday, we'll talk through data connectors in particular. But here we'll just use the sample data that I have, which represents some sales and customer demographics data. Again, if you're on a Pro plan or Plus plan, you could do multiple files at once. Here I'm going to select these 3 files, and I'll press OK to upload them. This is the first type of cell that you'll use in Julius when you're getting started with notebooks. I'm going to create another one here. And again, you could just hover between different cells or before a cell or after a cell to add in a new one. And again, you can see all the different types of cells that you have available. I'm going to change this cell into a file cell just so I could tell you a little bit more about it. So this is file cell is what it used to be called. It's actually called a data source cell because we're working on these data connectors. And again, there's multiple different ways you could add in files. So I just used the upload data file button. You could do any other files that you've already either created in Julius, uploaded in Julius, or had Julius generate. You could select those here too as well. You could also search for files here. And then, as I mentioned, you could also connect to data sources too, such as your data connectors. This is a prompt cell. So if you've used Julius in the past and you just are familiar with threads, it's very similar to just typing and talking to Julius. So here what I'll say is load and preview the data sets I uploaded. Then you could press run, or you could do command and enter to run it. And that's going to run the cell just like you're talking to Julius. It's going to generate the Python needed to fulfill my prompt. And it's going to run it inside of our environment. And again, our environment and sandbox here, I have 8 gigabytes of RAM. Again, you could upgrade this if you need to, depending on what your use case is. And then Julius will start populating it there. Just like in threads, again, there's going to be some suggested next steps. And I'm also going to open up the sidebar here too, so I could see some of these data frames. Awesome. So yeah, this is just basically how you can get started. I think one of the hardest things that folks have learning curves or learning about notebooks is just what is a cell and why. And you really can just break it down into just file cells and prompt cells. And you're basically using the threads feature inside of a notebook with a whole bunch of more things at your potential to unlock there too. Really cool thing that you could do that you can't do in threads is simply add cells between cells that you've already run, right? If, for example, I generated a visualization and I realized, hey, maybe I wanted to filter some of the data out and rerun it, it's kind of tricky to do that in threads. In threads, you work linearly. You can rerun certain prompts, but again, it's not easy to add back in context or divert Julius or redirect it into a different way compared to notebooks. I think notebooks it's pretty straightforward. You could simply just add in a new prompt and say, hey, let's actually just filter and only look at like customers that purchased in the last, I don't know, 9 months or something. That's some ways that you could filter or update the way that you're going with Julius inside of a notebook. And so it's a lot more simple and easy and straightforward to rerun cells first of all. And then also, if you need to redirect Julius or go a different route, you can do that in multiple ways in notebooks. Cool. At the end of this notebook, my goal is just to do maybe like customer segmentation analysis or some sales transaction analysis. So first thing I always typically do in a notebook is just load the data and get Julius digging into it, right? This prompt here, load and preview the data sets, will actually load them into what we call data frames, what we talked about in the onboarding webinar. And this is visible here on the right side, and you can actually see the different tables that I've uploaded and what's within this data set. All of this is data that Julius is going to be using, and all of it's going to be Julius will update it and filter as we go along too. So you can sort of see what's powering our analysis and powering the later visualizations. That's just very surface level, right? Julius is taking a look at the first several rows of each one of those 3 sheets, and it's actually loading it into the data sets. But it doesn't really go one step deeper, right? When you think about Julius, it's really your own data analyst in your pocket, right? What does that actually mean? I'm not a data analyst. I don't really know much about creating ML models or doing some of these deep things, but we could have Julius do a lot of that for us. So in this case, I'll just say, let's run some exploratory data analysis, commonly known as EDA. You don't really need to explain it to Julius. Julius knows. And look for any interesting trends or insights in the data before we dive in. Again, we're going to run this cell. You could run cells again by pressing Command and Enter or Control and Enter, or you could just click in the upper left-hand corner of the cells to run them. And again, Julius is going to execute those prompts. Exploratory data analysis, very useful. This isn't just for notebooks, but we talk about it. Julius, again, will get surface level insights when you first load the data. So when we did this step here, where we added in the data into Julius, that's why it's able to do some of those suggestions. It can know like, hey, I kind of understand what some of these columns are. I could think of a logical way that we want to analyze it. But beyond the surface, we really don't have any insights on trends or maybe some interesting tidbits of information that is hidden just a couple layers deeper inside of the notebook, if you will, or inside of the data, if you will. So typically, whether it's in a notebook or in threads, it's really helpful to just run some EDA or some exploratory data analysis, maybe explain to Julius what your end goal is or your end use case, or keep it broad. A lot of times when I'm using data sets, I really don't know what the end goal is. I'm just exploring. I want to find some insight. So that always doesn't have a clear end goal. So we could just set Julius on his way, do some exploratory data analysis. First, that's going to help us look for some insights. But second, it's going to help Julius gain even more context about the data. It'll equip it better to find insights, find trends, and even ask better questions from you guys too. So really common way that I'll get started on any notebook that I'm working on or even just a thread that I'm working on. I'm actually going to update this. I don't know why I had the interactive charts on. I'm going to go into the settings here, and I accidentally had interactive charts on. I really don't want that right now. We could talk about that later. I'm going to go back to our Julius theme here, and I'm going to rerun this. This didn't really output what I was looking for. Before I do that, let's actually click it. How did it do? Yeah, it wasn't supposed to generate a chart here. I'm going to rerun this here. It's another good time to pitch notebooks is if you do need to rerun cells, it's a lot easier to do it inside of a notebook versus doing it in a thread. That's because the thread, you have to edit it and then rerun it by pressing. It's just a little bit more messy. And notebooks, it's meant to be iterative, right? So I just ran into an issue there. I had the setting not set correctly. You could just press run and then rerun the cell, and that's all you have to do. You could even slightly update the prompt if you need to and just rerun it, all from the same interface. If you haven't given interactive charts a try, we could try that a little bit later. It does pretty well. It does pretty well at making something that's a little bit more interactive, right? So charts that are zoomable, that are, you could filter on, you could drill down into, similar to other dashboarding tools you might see out there. But in this case, not really what I was looking for. All right, so we have Julius doing some initial visualizations to see this a little bit better because we're not trying to do something that's interactive. And you can see, hey, on our first round of EDA, we're looking at some of the metrics like revenue by sales channel, revenue by product categories, and even things like customer lifetime value analysis, right? That's all from that one simple prompt of, hey, let's just do some EDA, I really forgot about what was in this data set, but it's really good, not just for me to know, but for Julius to gain that context. Next, let's actually do churn analysis. So I want to do a cohort analysis. Let's say cohort retention / LTV analysis. Visualize, we'll later visualize this. Just prepare the data for analysis. Very common for data to be messy and potentially unstructured, right? Even when you have a structured data set, there's times when you might have inconsistencies within the data, something that Julius can easily handle. Just have it double check and look for missing values, inconsistent timestamps, duplicate entries, all these things can happen, whether or not you're keeping track of the data manually, using a CRM or using whatever product you're using to gather your data. Cool, so Julius is preparing everything for the cohort analysis, in this case. It's starting to aggregate some of the data. You could simply click on export or expand to view these in depth, but here I'm just gonna press expand and you can see, yes, it's getting ready to do some cohort analysis. Getting the month values ready, getting the revenue together, and then also preparing the timestamps too, and getting the groups together. The other cool thing you could also do is export directly to Sheets. Something we'll talk about on the Thursday webinar, but if you've connected your Google Sheets or Google Drive account, one of the easiest ways you could do it is just by pressing this button. It'll create a brand new sheet for you to use, and then you could access all of the different things that you're using inside of Julius in Sheets. So we have more coming too as well. Cool, so we did this. I'm actually gonna switch over now to Anthropic. I love the Claude 4 Sonnet models for doing visualizations. I think leagues beyond what we get, or what I typically get from O3 and from OpenAI. If you haven't seen our video yet, we do a little bit more of an analysis where we used a notebook, ran 4 exact copies of a notebook, 4 different runs, using 4 different models. So it's pretty interesting to see the different ways that some of these LLMs will visualize them, the outputs, right? So in my case, anecdotally, I do enjoy using Anthropic's Sonnet a little bit more when it comes to visualization. So what I'm going to do here is create a new cell. I'll say, let's go ahead and do a cohort analysis. We'll say like a heat map, right? There's infinite ways of visualizing data, and Julius knows how to pretty much do all of it because it has a plethora of libraries available to it. I'll say, let's go ahead and do the cohort analysis heat map and visualize this for me. And then we'll run this one. But going back to that topic about different models, whether or not you're using either the same model or using a different model, they're all what we call non-deterministic, right? There's so many different ways that Julius can try to fulfill this prompt, Even if I rerun this cell and using the same exact prompt, using the same exact model, there's a non-zero chance, and it's probably likely that Julius will run a completely different code in order to fulfill that prompt, right? That's one thing to call out. And that's something that we could talk about a little bit more about reproducibility and how to get more consistent results if that's what you're looking for. Or sometimes it's better to have Julius try to figure it out like a new way every time, Maybe you're not really looking for the same exact visualization. Maybe you're just looking for high-level insights, which doesn't need to be the same exact code every single time. But more to come on that. Here we go. So you can see we did a cohort analysis. Looks kind of funny. Again, this is synthetic data, so I'm not surprised that there's pretty obvious biases here. But this is just one of the ways that we can visualize it within Julius, right? Let's say maybe I don't need everything from all time. We'll just say maybe I only need the first or the most recent 12 months just to give us something better. So let's use only the most recent 12 months in the visualization. That's one way that you could update it, is you could just simply add a new cell. The other way that you could do it is just go back to this original cell and just go, hey, let's only use the most recent 12 months. Either of these ways will work. If you want to keep the original output, you could just leave the cell alone and make a new one. Or if you don't really care, you could just rerun the same one here, which I'll do. We'll see how this does. As always, you could monitor and see what Julius is doing with the data in the right side here. So again, we were looking at the data as we went along. Always helpful. I get a lot of questions from folks like, hey, how do I double check that Julius's work is consistent, or is correct to begin with? First, I would always say just monitor what it's doing. I would say like 95% of the times when Julius transforms the data in a weird way or gives you a result that you're not really looking for, chances are it's using the wrong data frame. I've seen this a couple of times. You could simply just specify, hey, we're using this chart or this table or this data that I'm uploading specifically. There's odd chances, sometimes they'll be like, oh, I thought we were talking about sales, so I'm going to use like the sales table that we had uploaded. And that's why you might see something that's a little bit off. Best thing to do, just double check, watch what it's doing, look at the data frames that it's uploading or creating. Again, you could do this by simply clicking on like the tables themselves, like the text here, you can generate this one. Likewise, you can go back here where it's generating it, you can click expand and take a look at what it's doing, The other example I typically give is one time I created a visualization and all of the months were incorrectly ordered. It was, even though I was telling it to, do everything in like ascending order or make it the most recent months first, it just wasn't doing it. And when I looked at the data frames, all the data frames were all like just misaligned and not ordered correctly. So once I told it to, hey, just like fix this specific data frame, fix the ordering, the chart came out perfectly, but it was kind of confusing without looking directly inside of the data frames. So that's how you can sort of work back and forth, double check the values while Julius is working. But most times it gets it right, but that's just ways that you can help troubleshoot just in case it goes off course. Cool, so you can see the visualization generated a little bit here. If I wanted to build off of this, I would dig into why there's people subscribing or there's values here. Again, I think these are remnants or artifacts from the synthetic data set that I created. Again, that's one of the things that I use Julius for, is creating some of these data sets. I can't show any internal data here, but I'll try to get these data sets as close to accurate as possible, but that's probably what's happening here. The other one I would probably fix in this visualization is the month 0. Obviously, everyone who's subscribed that initial month is going to be 100%, so why show this, Maybe I want the visualization to start at month 1, but you could iterate a whole bunch using these notebooks. We do have more videos in our YouTube channel, and if there's ever some sort of analysis that you guys are looking for or want us to cover, let me know. We can cover these in the webinars, either in the notebooks webinars or even touch on it in the onboarding webinar. So let me know if you guys are doing it for like marketing or research or financial analysis. I could make a data set to help walk through what that might look like and even share these notebooks with you afterwards. Cool. The other cool thing is Julius is going to output some insights here, right? One of my favorite ways to take insights out of a data set or outside of a notebook is to simply make a new cell, use the user input cell, and then here, 3 different fields that we have to fill in. First is what we want the end user, so whoever's going to be using this notebook, even if that's myself, to answer. So I'll say, who is the intended audience of the report / output / summary of this notebook's findings and insights. The second box is where the user will type in their response. And then the third box here is what Julius will do with both the question and the response to that question. So here I'll say, create a summary report that is catered to the audience that the user mentioned. This is one of the most common ways that I'll use these user input cells. And what that means is if I wanted to make this a report for my head of operations and sales, when I run it, Julius will create that report there. So I just need to click out of this. I'm going to refresh the page here. I think it might have gotten stuck. And we'll run it from here. Let me see. Run all from here. Not sure why this is happening. I'll flag this one to the team. Let me open up this side panel again here. Maybe we'll try the old add it back in. Let's see if this works. I'm going to copy my response back in here, and then I'm going to update the prompt that I wanted Julius to do. Run off from here. Maybe there's a cell. I'm kind of happy that we're running into this because it's good to do this live. A couple ways to troubleshoot. I just went through 2 of them. Refresh the page if anything ever does get stuck. That's the first one. Second one, just delete the cell and re-add it. See if that works. Third one, check the run all button here. As I run these cells, you'll see stop all show up. Typically when you have trouble running a cell, it might be because a cell is run somewhere else, right? Sometimes I've had like notebooks with over 20 or 30 cells in it, and maybe I have one cell all the way in the back that's running. That's preventing me from running the cell I want to run. Double check this. In both of those cases, it didn't really show, so I'll flag this to the team. But you could always click stop all in order to stop whatever's running and then run the cell that you're looking for. I think in this case, there just might be something that's off that I'll flag. But that's one way that it'll generate a report based off of this. The other way that you could do it is click on the 3 dots up here. And we actually recently added the generate analysis report. When you click this guy, it's going to take all of the different prompts out. It's going to take all of the different code out, and it's going to just purely leave in the insights and the summary. And here you go. You can see key insights here for the customer analysis report. This is another way that you could easily share something with either your executive leadership team or maybe your manager or even your professors if you guys are doing research at school too. And then you could even download it as a PDF. A few other cells that we'll talk about in today's session. All of this code that's being generated by Julius, I didn't write any of this. Not familiar with Python myself. Some of you might be, some of you might not be. In any case, if there ever is cell or code that you do want to run, you could always add that as a cell here. You could add in a code cell. You could select the language here on the right side by either choosing Python, R, or SQL. And then you could even just paste in the code that you want to run or type in any code that you want to run to. And you can simply run it there. This will execute the code. It's going to rely on some of the variables inside of here needing to be there already, which means, hey, if you reference like a specific file name, if it's not in this notebook, it's not going to be able to run it. So that's one thing to watch out for. But if you ever do want to run specific code, you can do so there. The other really cool thing, when we were talking about reproducibility and getting consistent results, again, non-deterministic models will find many different ways to run and execute the code and fulfill the prompt. You could even see when I reran that one cell, it looks completely different. This visualization looks different because it probably used a different method in order to generate it here. You see like it might have been like the formatting was different, the specific colors were different. Who knows? All these different things change, right? But for example, if you do want like, hey, I love this visualization. Anytime you run this data set, I only want this data to be formatted or visualized this way. The one thing you could do is click on this stamp button here, which is turn into repeatable steps. Once I do that on the prompt that I wanted or the cell that I want to keep, you'll see this UI pop up, current state, which shows the cell as it currently is. So again, the visualization heat map I wanted to do and the code it generated along with the visualization. And it'll turn it into 3 different new cells, right? One is just going to be a text cell. So that's just like explaining what the prompt was. The actual code, so it's again going to split out the code that was run and executed from this specific cell. And then third, any other code or additional code or visualizations that it end up creating too. Once you're happy with that, you can simply just click on accept 3 changes. And it's going to create all those 3 or split out those 3 from that original prompt cell here, if that makes sense. So really common way, if I do love, the way that Julius either structured the data or visualized the data, and I want to do it that way every single time with the same exact file, maybe the data in that file is updating, or maybe there's more recent data, but I want to do the same analysis, follow those steps, and then now you could rerun the data set through it. And that's how, again, you can sort of think about notebooks at the end being more like engines, more so than just threads. They're not just one-off things. You could run these things over and over again too. So that's one of the perks there. The one cell I did mention during all of that was the text cell. This is a really easy way for you to add in context or notes as either you're designing your notebooks or building it out, or if you're even collaborating on a notebook with your teammates, right? One thing I haven't even mentioned today, all of these notebooks, you could just share a link with your team and they could come into the notebook live in real time. And that means they could literally watch you, typing. They could watch you updating and seeing the code outputs being generated and executed all in real time, almost like a Google Doc. So that's where having markdown cells like these ones, really helpful for adding in context. You could say, I really enjoyed the visualization, the code below should generate a heat map for cohort retention, right? You could add in any context. You could add in any instructions that you have for the users. You could even add in any videos too if you have a YouTube link. Some of the notebooks that you'll see in the Explore Notebooks page will have videos to it because they're made by either users or folks here at Julius to help say like, hey, this is what this notebook is used for and how to get started using it. We've seen many different use cases for markdowns, for these text cells. Some professors even will use this in their coursework. They'll add in maybe some lecture videos to talk through, share it with their class, and then use it almost like a homework assignment where they can go through, create their own prompts, and then share it back with their team. So a lot of different cool ways that we've seen these text cells and notebooks being used. Awesome. A few other things that we could touch on, right? I talked about exporting the results. The other cool thing you could also do, again, you can collapse all cell outputs. So if you're really just looking for the end results and don't really care too much about the code itself, you can collapse them. And then separately, you could also clear all the outputs too. And then finally, the other cool thing you could do is simply download this as a Jupyter notebook, right? Either if you are familiar with Jupyter notebooks and you're used to doing things like Colab or running your own notebooks, you could download what analysis Julius had done, run it in your own thing, update it there. If you have your own environment you want to use Julius's notebook in, you could do it there. Or you could even just download this as Jupyter Notebook, save it for later, and then even import it back into Julius. This is one of the easiest ways that I've found to just make sure that you're saving some of your work, especially if it's something really, really important that you can't really afford to lose. Cool. And then finally, I'll just show, say for example, I was done with this. Let's title this our cohort analysis visualization. I'm having trouble typing visualization today. Visualization. When I go back to my notebooks page, you'll see it titled here. And then you could simply press on create a new run, and it's going to be our whole entire notebook minus all the inputs that I use. So here, again, you could add in more up-to-date data, or you could add in, update some of your prompts that you would run, all building off of this original analysis or sort of template that I'm using now. And that's sort of the end goal of notebooks is, hey, we're done with this analysis. Maybe I need to do like a budget or need to do like dollar cost averaging or something, or I need to do customer segmentation analysis or cohort analysis every other week. Once you have the notebook, you can simply rerun it using up-to-date data. Cool. That's mostly it when it comes to notebooks. I know there is quite a lot of information here. There is a steeper learning curve to getting to use notebooks, I found myself. But again, I feel like there's so much more to notebooks and the features that the team has been building here, way more than the threads feature for sure. It just allows a little bit more functionality, also a lot more flexibility too, and reusability. So there's a whole bunch of different things that you can get out of it. If you're looking for more resources, right, when it comes to getting to know what notebooks are, our team is working on documentation. We're going to be adding a lot of that into notebooks to help, explain all the stuff we covered today. So different types of cells, different purposes of cells, some of the best practices there. A lot of this does live in our documentation that you can visit. Click on this. We have a whole notebook session that you can see. We have some videos. Hey, that's me. We have some from the webinar from last week, so 2 weeks ago. And then we also have a breakdown based off of all the different cells that you have at your disposal too. And all the different stuff that we have in Julius, will be added here. So you can see a little sneak preview of some of the data connectors and what we'll be talking about on Thursday's special webinar. We'll talk about, basically it's your go-to place for looking for anything related to notebooks or just getting to know how to use Julius in general. Other great resources for you guys is our actual support. So you can click on support down here. That our team inbox, which is team@julius.ai. And the other cool one that you could use is our community, which is right here, the community forum. And you could visit here. If you haven't, feel free to join. There's so many people on here that love to post or explain, best ways to get started using Julius, but also it's really cool to just see and show off some of the cool work that you guys are doing, whether it's on Julius or not. I think there's a really cool channel here called Showcases. You could see some of the different data that people have generated either in Julius, some that we've built ourselves. And then also even the one I was talking about earlier, which was like the synthetic data set generator. You give it a try, but I'll just get started by using the community and joining the community. So feel free to join here, introduce yourselves. Again, we always love hearing from our users. I really mean it. It's one of the reasons why we've been able to get to where we are today. We wouldn't be without the support of our community and our users around the world. Finally, again, I'm going to just highlight, we are having a special webinar session on Thursday when it comes to data connectors. We'll be talking all about Google Drive, Postgres, OneDrive, all the different ways that you could either take data directly into Julius. You could skip those steps of needing to upload data, which I went over earlier in the webinar. But it's more than that. It's you don't even have to write like a query anymore. It really is something special. So I really do hope you guys join there. And then, yeah, we'll talk through that and getting started and how to connect connectors, and I'll show off a little bit more there. And as always, you guys give feedback. If there's anything that you want us to cover in the next webinar or the next sessions, let me know. Again, that's either specific parts of Julius that you might not know how to use. So notebooks was a commonly asked one. If there's specific things that you're looking for, happy to dive into it. If there's a topic or use case, if you're doing work in marketing or want us to do work in finance, more finance related use cases, happy to do so there as well. And we've even gotten feedback that we want to have Julius in Spanish, some of these webinars in Spanish. So my Spanish is okay, but it's not as good as some of the teams here, but we do have an upcoming Spanish webinar. Again, Julius is around the world. It's actually really cool to see everyone around the world using Julius, which is really, really neat there. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my Q&A section. I see the team's been in here answering questions, but I'll give folks a few minutes to ask any questions that you guys have there. I'm going to see if I can turn the music back on a little bit while we listen for any questions here. I have to go here. Do I have to add Spotify? Let's see. Cool. While we wait for questions, again, do follow us on socials. It was really cool last night. We got to meet a lot of the friends of Julius. These are folks that have followed us along the whole way. Had a great opportunity to meet with a lot of folks last night, which is really cool. Our CEO, Rahul, was on TBPN, which is pretty cool. You can always follow us on Twitter to see what the latest and greatest is. And some of the team here too. You also see a little bit more about the events that are coming up, and then we're going to put out some more content just to, get folks knowing, hey, what can you use Julius for? What are the different ways that you can get started using Julius too? Awesome. Doesn't seem like there's not many questions coming up. Awesome to hear that this was great. We love doing these. It's actually one of my favorite things to do. Very rarely, it's hard to, when we have users around the world, I wish there was a way, and there soon will be, hopefully, for us to meet and chat with users in person. I am so jealous of some of those companies that do these community in-person events. I think just having users together, just not even just talking only about Julius, but just about the work that they're doing, be really, really cool. Cool. All right, great question. How is Julius different from Colab Agent or uploading files to ChatGPT or Anthropic? They also I can't read today. They also provide almost the same functionality, just to know. That's a great question. We get that one a lot, not just from users, but also from enterprise use cases too. I think the biggest takeaway is that Julius is built as a data analyst, right? You have tools. We use ChatGPT here all the time. We use Claude here all the time, so we're no strangers to using it. But when it comes to data analysis, I think when you have a model that's specifically built or tooling that's specifically built around that use case first, There's a lot more that users can get out of it when it comes to either analysis or the actual tooling itself, right? So if I go back to my screen, the biggest thing that I say when people ask this is the environment itself, right? Let me go back to Julius. And if we look at our resource sandbox, this is like 8 gigabytes of RAM. You can expand resources here. I think this is one of the biggest ways that you have more processing power at your disposal, right? I think just having this environment set up for you is something that I sort of take for granted a lot of times. You sort of forget all of this gets done in the back, behind the scenes. You get a lot more processing power when it comes to Julius here versus ChatGPT and even Anthropic Code too. You get more processing here, and it's a lot more seamless when you want to do things like notebooks with other users, right? With teammates, right? ChatGPT has enterprise plans and they also have team plans, but there really isn't an easy way to collaborate with folks inside of one single thread as you're working on it, right? They used to have a collaboration feature, I think, at ChatGPT, if I recall correctly, but it wasn't something that was like natively built in, right? And especially natively built in for data analysis, right? So we have research teams around at several universities that are just like, it's really cool to see these teams growing, but they all share these notebooks with themselves. They're working on things live in real time, and they're also working async too, and that's something that you just really can't get just with ChatGPT. There. When it comes to like things like Colab, I would say the connections are a lot more seamless here. It's a lot easier for at least non-technical users, especially like folks like myself. I don't have a technical background just to get started. I'm not saying any hate towards Colab. We use the Colab. I think the team here was inspired by a lot of the features there, but I just think having one seamless platform where you can upload your data, when we talk about on Thursday, all of your data connectors coming in and the analysis being done and the SQL being written for you and being able to collaborate. It's just like, we think about all these features because it's in our blood, if you will. And it's something that we really care about, which is analytics first. Again, no hate towards those products. We love using ChatGPT. I think, again, we have all of their models and they're great partners with us, but it's just, you get a little bit more in our platform than just those tools alone. Check out BigQuery Collab Notebook. Will do. I've used Collab a little bit before myself. Again, I had a little bit of trouble, first getting started. I was trying to use Jupyter notebooks and get started using VS Code. Even using ChatGPT to help guide me through setting it up and spinning up my virtual machine, I was so confused. I think it was that day, I think it was Julius, I think it was the day when there was like an outage, like the Cloudflare thing was going on. I was like, I literally couldn't use Julius. It was hard. It was hard. I'm not even just saying that as a Julius employee. I was just saying that myself. I was getting kind of frustrated trying to set those things up. So I definitely do take the work that the engineering team did for granted. In just spinning up these resources for us in these environments, I think you definitely do take it for granted, especially as a non-technical user. Cool. Nice. Can Julius be hosted on a private cloud? Not yet. I don't know if Alex or Xander answered this question. We do some dedicated deployments, but that's mostly with our enterprise team and enterprise level contracts. But if you go to Julius, if I can find my bar here, and it is something that you are interested in doing, feel free to reach out to us. Go to the pricing page here and then just click on contact sales and just let us know a little bit more about your use case. We're more than happy to reach out and talk to you there and just see what we can do. But you can see some of the different things that come with enterprise as well. And you can see the different things about onboarding, but also there's one for dedicated deployments too. The other cool resource I'll point you guys to in case you haven't seen this already is our Trust Center. Common question, where does our data go? Again, we covered this a little bit in our onboarding webinar. If you ever have questions, you could come visit here, see our policies and programs that we have in place. And if you want to check out either our security one pages or even our SOC 2 Type 2 report, you can click on these to request access, and then we'll give you access to those as well. Cool. Awesome. Maybe do one more question. I don't know, which cloud do we run on? Everything's on GCP. Again, this is me as a non-technical user. GCP is on Google Cloud, but everything is bucketed separately. So I'm not sure 100% on the details there, but you can check out our security center there. If that makes sense. But yeah, we'll look forward to the webinar on Thursday. I really am hoping you guys are able to join. And if not, no worries. We'll record this one as well. But there's times, these data connectors, it's hard to explain especially it's hard for me to understand initially what it meant. But you have all of our data living in like Postgres, for example, many other data warehouses. What we used to have to do, even for our own like internal like data and research, was run a query inside of a tool like pgadmin or run a query inside of a tool like DataGrip, right? Then you have to export it, and then you have to upload it into Julius, and then you could run the analysis to get those insights on it. Data connectors, in a nutshell, eliminates that whole process. It was crazy for me to see it in real time, but once you connect directly to Postgres, you don't even need to write the query anymore. You don't even need to give Julius the context about your tables. All of this was blockers, at least for me, because when I first started, again, like anyone getting started in a new company, it takes a little bit of time to know these tables and these columns and how they're organized. And even if they aren't organized, there's some context that you'll have to keep, right? So when you really just want a really quick insight, you're in a meeting, for example, or someone asks you something on Slack, we don't have an analytics team here at Julius. We use Julius for that. It just helps make that whole process so much more streamlined and easier. Way easier to show than it is to explain, but looking forward to our webinar on Thursday to show you guys a little bit of that magic and what the team's been cooking up here. And again, we'll share it as well. We'll share the recording, but you guys can always check it out too if you're not able to make it. That being said, thank you guys so much for joining. Have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening. I know that there's folks around the world here tuning in, and I really am looking forward to seeing you guys at the next webinar, whether it's on Thursday or one of our ones in the future. And we'll see you then. Take care.